Welcome to our board meeting. Can I have a motion to open?
I make a motion.
A second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag.
of the United
United States of America
and to the
and
republic
to the republic
for which
for which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
liberty and
and
justice for all.
Thank you. That's a task with so many people on Zoom. Thank you. So just a reminder, just as I said before, anybody that's not speaking, if you could just mute, it'll be helpful. And tonight's a budget workshop. So I believe we're going to start with the middle school. Rich, is that the plan?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
If Charlie is ready to go.
Terrific. There's Sarah. Good.
I'm ready.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Charlie. It's all
Charlie,
yours.
you're up.
Thanks, everybody. Good evening. I'm going to go through, I'll speak. I know you have copies of the budget, so I'm going to focus just on that first summary page that has all of the codes from 2020 down to 2611. So if you go down to the bottom, just above the BOCES line, you'll see that the middle school's budget proposal for 21-22 is $122,610.89. And that reflects actually a total decrease from the prior year of a little over $10,000. Keith and I met. I appreciated that he took the time to sit with me, especially being new, for him to understand the middle school budget. We met in November, and then we met again in December and went through it line by line again so he could understand it and then understand then the changes that we made that the board and administration had asked in terms of reducing supplies by 20%. So there, if you were to go through all of these pages, you'll notice a 20% reduction for the most part, in all of the supply lines. However, it doesn't reflect on the first page. So if you look at this first page and go all the way to the right and see change, you'll see changes are 18%, some are 20, some are 15. That's because that's for that entire line. But there are 20% cuts to all of the supply lines in each of these master codes. And I think that really worked this year. If we were going to cut from any place, that was really the best spot. Because of the pandemic, we weren't using shareables and we weren't using a lot of consumables or things that the kids would normally touch. So we actually have those in reserve for next year. So making the cut this year, we're not going to need it. However, I just want to point out to the board that even though we were successful in making that $10,000 cut, that's not going to be sustainable in 22-23. So looking ahead, we would need to look for some kind of restoration of that amount because we would need those consumables again. In a way, the pandemic was good in that regard, that we didn't need all of that. And most of our teachers converted to PDFs and electronic resources. But when we are fully back in person, we're going to need to dip back into those actual materials. So once again, we can do it for a year, but looking out and projecting to 22-23, I'd be coming back to you and asking for that $10,000 back to be able to buy those, the consumables and the materials that we actually share and touch once again. So those are the decreases, and they're reflected in 12 of those codes on that first page. And then the only increase is in the first code, 2020, and that's supervision. And that is $1,000, which is almost 3% on the budget. So if you turn to page 1, and the pages are numbered at the bottom right, you'll see that that increase falls in travel and conferences. But I just want to be clear about that. It's not actually a travel or conference increase. We actually cut most of those codes as well because we're anticipating that people won't be doing much in person, that a lot of our training can still be done online, and who knows how long that will be into next year. But if you turn to page 4, you'll see what the increase is. the $1,000 there is traveling teachers, and this is a contractual item. It's not for conferences, but it's teachers who travel between buildings. So for years, Isabel and I had a back and forth about this because the middle school is somewhat unique that we share so many staff members with the high school and the middle school because we sometimes only need a single person or 2/5. And those teachers have a contractual entitlement to be paid. They get a lump sum payment for the year for doing that kind of travel. And Isabel would always appear at the end of the year to us and ask for that money. And that was never accounted for in our codes. That always came from someplace else. So Keith and I worked it out where we've accounted for at least 10 staff members for this year that would get that stipend, and we're actually putting it in the budget. That's always one of those things that just happened. It was always a point of problem, contention, confusion. So now it's finally in the budget. It has nothing to do with travel or conferences, but just, as I said, something in the teacher's contract that entitles them to payment for travel between buildings. So now we've accounted for that, and that's really a cleanup. But I didn't want you to think that was an increase to travel in any way, because that's not what it is. So that's really our one increase.
Charlie, I do appreciate you doing that, because June sometimes we'd be like, oh no, we forgot to account for that. So thank you.
Exactly. Yeah, no problem. It's happened for so many years. It was time to just fix it. And that's really the summary of the major changes. As I said, it's 12 decreases and that one increase of $1,000. But basically that's it. Do you have questions about specific codes that I can answer?
Can I just ask a question from like 100 feet up? And maybe this is for Keith or for both of you, just a question. And so just I want to go back to the issue with respect to understanding that we've lived through one really unique year and are now budgeting for another really unique year. And that hopefully the year after it's going to be back to normal again. The only thing about that is that we still are under a 2% tax cap. And so sort of budgeting in the future, I mean, one of the ironies of it is the 2% tax cap sort of dissuades us from cutting things, because then we reduce our base, even if we don't need it. And then you have to double it up, in the out years. So my question, I guess, to you, Keith, is like the reductions that we've asked in supplies and all of that, are those things that we're needing this year to try and shoehorn, given increases in ERS and other things that we're trying to shoehorn into the budget that we have this year? Is that necessary? And I'm just concerned in general what we're going to do the year after, and whether or not this is going to be, for sure a problem, because, we're going to need to reinstall some travel. I hope we have field trips again. I hope we have all of that. So can you tell me where we arrived at, and maybe this is for all of the schools, where we arrived at the amounts that schools needed to reduce?
Yeah, so I'll chime in first.
Sorry, that was a long question.
No, it's okay. No, it's a great question. So we discussed cutting a certain amount. It's only $10,000 from their budget. Their budgets are very small.
Right.
So all of our building budgets are actually the smallest part of our overall budget.
Right.
So it's really not going to be too much of a concern going forward. Right. So that's really where that came from. Like Charlie was saying, great job, great idea. That we're really not using those certain components of curriculum this year. So we didn't need it. So we're going to open, as we're going to do like another COVID year next year. So we're planning another COVID year next year. Hopefully we'll find out more information, April, May, June, July, and then we can maybe decipher and put some more money back into the codes towards the end if we decide to open in a normal school year. So it's going to be mainly we're doing two budgets. We're going to have a COVID budget and then a non-COVID budget.
But just to clarify, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand it, because I'm sure we're going to be through everything else. So my question is more like, are we reducing the base funding? I understand that we don't need that money this year because we don't need to have field trips. We don't need to do all that. My concern is about reducing the base to a point where, if we get hit with something, next year, does that then become an issue with, okay, can we find another 20,000 here? And like, maybe it's just because Christina and JP and all of us who've been on it for a while, remember the days where we're like, cutting here and there just to actually, to do it. So, 10,000 here, $50,000 here ends up adding up. So I just want to understand if we're cutting our base because we need to cut our base to get under 2%, or we're just doing it because we don't anticipate needing the funds for those programs. Does that make sense?
Is it more of a shift or is it a cut? That's, I think, the question.
So now I understand your question. Okay, so sorry, I didn't understand it before. So no, we're not reducing the base. That'll be the answer to your question. We're not reducing the base at all.
So you've shifted that $10,000 you took from Charlie's budget, which he doesn't need this year, you put somewhere else so that our overall base next year when Charlie comes back and asks for that $10,000 is there and can be reallocated.
Right, exactly what JP was saying. Just shifted the funds.
So we can use it like on a one-time expenditure or something along those lines. Okay.
All right. I just wanted to understand that. Thank you.
And it makes sense. And it's
great question,
to know
Jackie.
that.
Great question, Jackie. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Sorry.
Charlie, the BOCES owls, that's pulled out at the bottom of the cover page. Is that for some reason for that?
No, that's always been that. That's another one of these things that I think we should clean up at some point. There's a separate BOCES budget, and I was explaining to Keith that Isabel always kept that in years past, it somehow would get lost. So I always put that. It's not actually in my budget. That's why it's separate, but I always put it down there as a reminder because someone has to account for that because we'll be looking for that money. It's not a middle school code. So I always leave it there. And Keith is aware that he has to put that in his budget somewhere.
Yep.
So it's in the larger BOCES code, but you're just flagging it that out of that money in the BOCES code, 3750 goes to you for owls. Okay.
Exactly what we did. Yeah.
Which is a great program, by the way. That was really a success, right?
Yeah, it's great because we had the problem where one year it wasn't in there and then people had to scramble to find the money. So I don't want that to happen again. So it's more like a flag, like just like you said.
That money will be earmarked for Charlie. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I honestly didn't have very many questions at all on this budget. I mean, we've been through it so many times. Everything is standard. It didn't really seem like there's anything new that's really nothing of concern to me. I don't know if anybody else has any.
I don't have anything either. I mean,
I don't have anything either. I was going to ask the question that Jackie asked, will we get, next year when we need the 10,000, will we be in trouble? But that was answered. So we're good.
Good. All right.
Great.
Thanks, you, Charlie.
Okay.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. Thank you.
Which one do you want next, Rich?
I guess it's between, let Karen and James duel it out. Who'd like to go first?
I like to rip the Band-Aid off, so
James, you beat me to the unmute button is what happened. You beat me to the unmute.
It's the mute button you're blaming it on. Oh, okay. I see how that goes.
And for both of you, it's the first time presenting these to us, so no pressure.
Yeah, and yes, it is. Thank you, everyone. I had a lot of help. The fortunate part of having Adam here, he didn't go away. So I had my predecessor who, helped me out with this, along with meeting with Keith, and my coordinators were valuable. And my clerical has been unbelievable in helping me out through this process. So I just kind of want to put that out there as well. A lot of what Charlie said really applies to us as well, where most of the cuts are coming out. Supplies, that was a request that was made. So the coordinators did a good job at looking at, thinking in terms of a COVID scenario of where we can tinker a little bit. And just like Charlie said, it's one of those things where it's not necessarily something we would look to sustain for a long period of time and would probably have to re-up. So some things that would normally be repurchased, we're kind of holding off, to repurchase them. That's kind of, as a global thing. Just to highlight some areas, one of the increases in regular school You know, a lot of that had to do with getting things translated. There were some things, one of the big ones was the program of studies that we need to get translated into Spanish. I thought that was really important, so we can incorporate Spanish speakers into that process in a larger sense, and it's tough to do unless you have something that's in the language. And you know, so that's one area that we had to make some increases. Another area to kind of look at is if you look over at Family and Consumer Sciences, you see a significant increase, and that's because of the kitchen program that we're doing next year. You know, thinking of supplies, materials, books, things like that. So that was one area where we knew that we needed to up things a little bit. One area there's a little bit of an error on there, just so you guys are aware. And my math coordinator, she actually is awake right now, but she might chime in a little bit. If you look at math, there's an increase, and that was really over books. We were able to purchase the books in this year's budget, so we're not going to be using it for the following year's budget. So the overall budget will go down a bit. So that's good. I think it was 20,000 was the number.
24.
A little bit of an increase in the library area, just a tad, you know, thinking in terms of COVID, you know, the possibility of increasing the use of digital media, we thought would be, you know, an important thing kind of preparing. I mean, that's good, COVID aside, you know, but, you know, COVID definitely increases the need for that. Otherwise, you know, we're primarily, you know, we put off some things I know in science, and Mr. Merker can speak to it, some of the tables that we were looking to get. You know, we kind of put to the side because if we're looking at a socially distanced, you know, scenario or something approximating that, having the additional tables may not necessarily be it may not be the time to fully do that. And once again, that's one of those things where there'll be another point when we get into a more normal environment where we're going to be looking to recoup that and make that request again. So that is kind of an overall summary. I have just about all my coordinators here. If you guys have any specific questions about a particular department, we can answer them for you.
Question. I had just a couple of questions, and then if any of the coordinators want to add anything there. So are there any? I know that you're adding a class, and I saw the money for that for the mock trial.
Yes.
Class there. Are there any other, you know, and I actually circled and was asking about math because I was confused. Are there any other curriculum changes this year? Like I know we've put money into AP research. That was a big one year. AP seminar was a big add 1 year. Are there any other curriculum changes?
There isn't anything that I can, and I'll let the coordinators kind of chime in case there's something I'm forgetting. There isn't any curriculum change that's going to impact the budget in any way.
Okay. And what is going to be, and maybe this is a question, I'm just curious, what's happening this year and what the plan is outgoing, the theater and the musicals. How are we handling all of that?
Great question. So, and I got to give Dave Banzer a lot of credit for this, for persevering through it. So instead of a full-scale musical, she's doing basically like little skits with different performances that are going on. So you're looking at 2 or 3 kids. They have different days when they stay after to practice. It's going, obviously we're not going to have the large performance that's happened. You know, we are going to do a videotape performance of it, and we're still kind of going back and forth about how exactly we would put that out to the community. But we do have kids who are working on smaller skits. Obviously it's not the same size and scope as it's been in the past, but I just felt it was really important that even in COVID, we need to start to think of ways to say yes. You know, even my first instinct was like, no, we can't do it, you know, but then you start thinking, okay, well, why can't we do it? What can we do to make, you know, this safe? And can we still socially distance and still have a skit? And how do we do that? We're not going to have an audience, but we can film it so the kids are working for something. So yeah, it's going to look different like everything, but we are going to have our version of a performance.
Yeah, I saw something in the paper from JP. You may know more about this, or Sarah, than me. I saw something in the paper that you know, the village was planning on maybe using some of the park this year with Guildhall to do some performances, something like that. I don't know.
I'd heard it spoken of, but I don't know anything detail-wise myself. Maybe Sarah does.
I don't get any of those details until everybody else does.
Sarah.
No, but I think they are going to try and utilize the park.
I heard something like that as well too.
Right.
So,
I mean, we'll see. We'll see when we get a little later in the year. You know, we'll see what happens in terms of exam schedule and things like that. I don't want to close the door on anything. So we're keeping our options open in terms of any other scope of a performance. But what we have in place now will be safe, follow all the guidelines that we're currently at, with the ability to look at other options.
I had one other question. We added a few years ago money for mental health that we increased last year a little bit more. And, God knows that I think mental health is probably the single biggest challenge facing our kids right now. And I just wanted to ask you or Adam, who's here, what your thinking is on that, and if that's enough money, and do we need to allocate more this year? I'm really, really concerned about our kids and our faculty and everyone right now.
I think you really did it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, James, I'm going to throw it back to you. I mean, Jackie, I would say exactly what we said in my budget presentation. I think, James, did you put more in that code even? Did we end up putting more?
Honestly, I can't remember if I did. I'm kind of going at it from a different angle in terms of, I've been thinking a lot about our schedule for next year and putting some things in place. Long story short, without, taking up too much time to go into too much depth, there are definitely some things that we can do that would address it that aren't costing money, namely an advisory, just so there's a connection that's had with students. I want to do something where carving out time for a 9th grade and a 10th grade and maybe even 11th grade planning period. These are things that don't cost money, where teachers can then talk about what's going on with our students. It really has an academic focus, but in that there are those mental health issues. So almost having more eyes on it, which isn't necessarily purely a function of money, but more of a function of structure. So the concept of what you're saying is, what are we going to be doing to address mental health? Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that's going to be a real issue, even when we're, I don't think we're going to return to normal anytime soon, in the sense of like what happened before, this time last year. Even if we are in a situation where everyone's back and we have Matt, people are going to be dealing with a lot of trauma that they're going through. And that's kind of the social worker me is very aware of that. And that's going to be something that's going to be carried out for multiple years. So in terms of dealing with that, that's more of a structural piece that I'm looking to add in, that as of right now, I don't see how that's going to impact us financially. I think we're sufficient in terms of our budget.
Right. I think other board members would concur with me that, we will put in as much as needed for mental health.
Absolutely. That's why I know it was more in Adam's budget, and we flagged it to see that if we don't have enough at the end, by the time we go through this process, or if we think we need more, I mean, I think that would be something that's worth talking about.
Okay.
I don't think there's anybody here that's going to be against it, put it that way. Just Keith, because he's got to figure out where it comes from. Other than that, that's it.
Keith, we'll talk tomorrow. I'm kidding.
We'll find it. We'll definitely find it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Anybody else have any questions for James?
Anything any of the coordinators want to add to anything? Thank you for all you're doing.
All right.
Great.
Feel free to jump ahead if you want to.
Yep, I think we're good to go. And coordinators, thanks so much for joining in, just in case there were questions. Appreciate all your hard work that you put into it, and just trying to keep things as normal as possible. Appreciate all your time and effort.
I can just add one thing with the coordinators. I really want to thank them, because they're all very gracious and very understanding, still maintaining the strength of their programs, but understanding that there need to be give and take. And they work really hard, and I really appreciate all the work that they've done with this and with everything else. They've been a great group, so I really appreciate them.
And then if I could also, a special thank you to Heather and Troy, because as coordinators, they are overseeing the elementary school building as well, and they've done a tremendous job.
Great. So the gift to you is that you don't have to stay for the whole meeting. So enjoy the evening, guys. Enjoy the evening, coordinators.
Well, I would just like to add, I'd like to thank, on behalf of the coordinators and the teachers, I'd like to thank the support of the administration and the Board of Ed. We really feel it, and it really helps. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
We all need more art in our life right now. We need art and music.
Well, thank you very much.
It's better when we're talking about like French horns and grand piano. So a far better conversation, truthfully.
Yeah.
Much better.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I think we're moving on to Karen.
All right, sounds good. I'd like to start as Charlie and James did on that summary page. And if we could look to that bottom total line on page 1, you'll see that the overall budget for the John Marshall Building has also gone down 9.9%. And I'll go through where some of those decreases happened. A good portion of them did come from cuts in our material and supplies budget, as we were asked to do. And I also agree that the sustainability for the following year is going to be difficult. Quite honestly, we have pods at John Marshall that, will have to be gone through this summer to reevaluate. So having that decrease, I felt comfortable making that decrease because I think there needs to be an entire, reevaluation of the supplies that are, have been put in storage. And hopefully they're in good condition to be utilized again, hopefully next year. So I'll go through the summary page, and certainly if you have any questions, A 2020 supervision was lowered by 5.51%. There isn't much wiggle room there because that's a lot of our copy machine budget. And it's lower because of some supplies that were ordered and didn't need to be reordered. And I also decreased the psychological evaluation budget. And I know we were just talking about mental health, and I certainly do agree that it's a big concern, especially for all of our students, but especially for our students who've been fully remote. And I know I have a meeting later this week with the support staff at John Marshall, really to talk about the transition back into in-person learning. I think we're going to be able to provide a great deal of that support with the resources that we have with our support staff. And I do know that we have a mental health budget outside of this. So some of the reduction did come out of psychological evaluations there on A 2020. A good portion of the decrease came out of A 2110, and full disclosure, a majority of that came from field trips. And it's my understanding that a number of years ago, there was a district-wide field trip code that was created for all of the buildings to have their field trips taken out of the district-wide code, but the money never actually came out of the John Marshall budget. So that a good portion of that $13,321 is actually field trip money that was built into our budget and hasn't been, well, certainly wasn't utilized this year, and maybe hasn't been utilized in years past based on the district-wide code. So that was a large reduction in that area. I also had a little bit of a reduction on A 2111. That a good portion of that are our phonics consumables and F&P kits. And I have to say, this is our second year in the building. It's only my first year, but second year having coordinators in the building. And it's made a huge difference in the tracking of so many of our kits and supplies. So the coordinators have done and are continuing to do a great job of tracking materials and helping teachers understand that they belong to a classroom, not necessarily the teacher. And I think maybe in years past, a lot of those materials traveled from year to year as a teacher maybe moved from one grade level to another and maybe had gotten lost in the shuffle. And so that has tightened up a great deal since coordinators have been added into the John Marshall building. And so I even, foresee in the future that unless we add new programming, continuing to decrease, because as long as we keep those materials in good shape, we won't need to continue to reorder them because we're keeping better track. The science, if I'm just gonna, I don't want to jump art and music. When I came into John Marshall, the art and music budgets were the two budgets that barely had any money left in their codes. So I just want to say again that they utilize every single cent. They service 6 grade levels in art and music, and so certainly no decrease. And if I could, I would have liked to have given them an increase because they really service a majority of the building. So A2123 science, also there were field trip monies in that science code, so they were able to come out. So that's a good portion of that decrease. And A2806 co-curricular, that went up just a tad bit for hopefully to utilize a director and sound and lighting for next year. I did encumber some money before the budget closed in hopes that maybe we would be able to put something together this year. The director, whose name is escaping me at the moment, we had a brief email conversation, and she was not interested in doing a virtual type performance. I know it's such an unusual year. So even though I encumbered that money, there's a good chance that that won't be utilized for this year, but I certainly wanted to make sure it was in the budget so that hopefully we can pick up for next year, because that's a huge loss, not to have the drama this year. And then lastly, library. It looks like that's such a elementary education budget, barely a couple of dollars change. It really stayed stationary. And then the library budget came down $500. 11% looks like a big number, but it really was just a $500 decrease in the library. Did anybody have questions?
What is the enrollment? Is it up, down?
We are at 560 today, and actually in the last couple of days, we've lost a few students have moved, due to different circumstances, families moving. But today we are at 560.
And that's including pre-K. That's pre-K to
It is. Okay. It is. Yeah, pre-K is rather small. Pre-K has 57 students, and I, was speaking with Amanda Hayes recently in registration, and we do a big bulk of that. Pre-K is our first registration year, so it'll be interesting. I know of 3 students currently who are going to private, nursery or pre-K that are going to join our current pre-K class, but it'll be interesting to see because there's a huge disparity. Pre-K is at 57 and kindergarten's at 97.
Right.
So there's a big difference in those 2 classes.
But it might be COVID related.
It was a big difference.
Didn't put their kids in. Yeah.
That's exactly. Right. It was like the half day program.
Right. They're in the community, but not necessarily sending their kids to pre-K this year. So
right. I mean, with the pandemic, I think that has a big impact, and we might have that number might change for next year as they're incoming kindergarten.
I think it definitely will. I think it'll definitely change. It'll jump.
Yeah.
And the hope is to go back to full day pre-K for next year.
Right.
How has it gone this year, Karen, with the pre-K as the being in the half days, and with the teachers and how they've been flexible with that?
They've been absolutely flexible. The most interesting thing is the space they're utilizing. We have 3 classrooms in the library. So that's, a very unique and close, right. Even though everybody has their distance, it's a very close situation in the library for those 3 classes to be functioning there. But no, they've adjusted, but the overall consensus from the pre-K team is that they would also like to go back to full day pre-K.
Oh, right. Of course.
Karen, I have a question. Does next year's pre-K assume not half day, but full time?
We'd like to. That's our hope. Right. Our hope is to have full day.
It's in the budget. And right now, the budget allows.
Yes.
And John,
how are
there's
we with classrooms?
We use a pre-K grant. I'm sorry. There's a pre-K grant, John, that we filed through the state that when we file that next year, we'll indicate full day. So we get money from the state.
And the full day really just depends on if we have the room to bring, right?
Yeah, that's what Sarah was just asking about room. We have the classrooms to be back in a similar situation that we were in last year, but it's certainly not going to be at a 6 feet distance.
No. Right. So it depends on what guidelines were given at the time. If anything should change majorly, but it looks like we're on the track to being able to do it unless something major should change. Right. But it's not a budgetary issue, just to be clear. Bringing back pre-K full day is more about just what's going on with the space and the plans to try to bring back everybody.
Yes.
Yes. Because we get a lot of, you cut the pre-K. No, we didn't. It's not a budgetary thing.
Right.
It's a space and safety issue,
it was a space and safety issue this year, for sure. And I wasn't on board when those decisions were made, but I can clearly see why they were made.
Good. Anybody else have any questions?
No, I just was going to say, your art budget is like $6,506. So if you need more money, Keith, come on, give it a break. Give her more money. Right.
I think we've given her more money several times because we're like, please take it.
Yeah, so if you need more art money,
Yeah, more kids.
we'll find it for you.
I think there
Right.
maybe there was $100 in that budget when I came on board, in November. I mean, she really.
Yeah.
If you need more money, we're not going to cut back on art money.
Right.
Yeah,
So it will
Thank
be
you.
found. It will be found in the budget. You shouldn't be cutting art money. So
I think one year, Jackie, do you remember we divided it out and it was like $10 a kid?
yeah, I think we made them take more money one year.
Yeah,
So,
we made them take more money.
In all seriousness, that's not hard money to find.
Yeah.
Great.
So you should have as much art money as you need for your kids.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you. I really sincerely want to thank the board and thank Keith for all the time that he spent with me, especially in the beginning, going through the budget. So I appreciate all the support. Thank you.
Well, congratulations to the three of you, being Karen, James, and Keith. It's all your first year here, and budgeting is one thing, but we do things a little, differently. To say the least, I guess we try to be as open as we can about the process, and thank you for learning how we do it and presenting it. You saw Charlie. I mean, Charlie did a great job, but that's why he went first. On top of that, to give you guys an idea, and you've been involved to some degree, some of you, with our budget process, but. Thank you guys, and at least it's behind you.
Yeah.
I just want to thank all three as well. The great job with the budgets, especially for the first year. James and Karen and Charlie as well did a great job. Thank you.
Definitely. Anybody else have anything?
No, our next meeting
I'm
is
good.
next week is our public regular meeting, right?
Correct. Yep. And we definitely, as we were speaking before, just to reemphasize that we will be talking about trying to move kids. I want the board to be involved in the discussion, and please be ready with your input for trying to get more kids back in school.
Yeah.
I think we're at that point. We've been talking to our medical team, the administrators. There's been a lot of discussion going on behind the scenes, and I think we can do it safely. So we'll give you the broad outline. The first time the board will be involved in speaking will be at the academic committee meeting. So please feel free to join in then. Adam, that's on Thursday or?
Thursday, 1 p.m.
Thursday.
There have been invites or have been sent for Zoom.
Good.
Yep.
No,
And
we've been getting a lot of questions on what our plans are, because we did talk about, trying to bring more kids back, and now that the numbers are dropping, the conversation, the time is here now. So we will be talking about it. I know we're getting a lot of emails. If people can just be patient and give us our first board meeting in March, I think we'll lay things out to the best of our ability at that time. And I think, if we can follow the guidelines that are in front of us, we can maybe be successful to get, I don't know about everybody back, but really, really close. And hopefully we can get everyone back.
Is spacing not an issue anymore with bringing kids back in?
Well, that's the million-dollar question,
Right.
Justin. What we're looking at is we're thinking that we can go down to 4 feet, just to be very direct. We have the plastic barriers, we have masks, we've dealt with the ventilation system. It's going to get the weather will be much warmer. I think we'll be able to move some classes outside. So I think I don't think CDC keeps on saying they're giving us guidelines and stuff, but nobody addresses, is it a mask or social distancing? Is it a mask and social distancing? It's very unclear. And that's why we're making this local decision. We put a lot of thought and time into it. The positivity rates are really going down. I think we might even have dipped below 4% this week in our community. So, a lot of factors are playing into it. The bottom line is, I think the social, emotional toll that is being taken with our kids, we just have to address that. It's going to be a year, March 13th.
It's right around the corner.
Just think of where we were this time last year as a board, the discussions that we were having. It was,
oh my gosh.
And trying to get answers and just getting the complete runaround and then thinking it was really just going to be a short-term closure. We weren't really planning long-term because we couldn't get any straight answers, and sort of shocking to look back at what we thought this was going to be versus what it turned out to be.
Christine, I remember being in the meeting where you go, we might just have to give up spring break. And I thought, are you crazy? Like, what?
And then that's what they
happen.
told us to do. Yep.
And Sag Harbor's closed a week early, and then we followed suit. So, yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind too,
that was crazy.
We will, as far as I'm concerned, and our ability, we will have remote learning for those people that are not comfortable with coming back.
Yeah.
That's part of our
right.
So, there's going to be something sort of for everyone. If you're not comfortable, listen, I understand it, and you may have many reasons for not being uncomfortable. I think some districts were not doing that early on, and I just don't know how you don't do that. And I appreciate our staff for working with us on that, because it's not easy. It's a total different way of teaching, and it's different for kids to learn. And so it works for some and doesn't work for others. So, that's something that we just have to keep in mind.
Yeah.
We seem to be having the opposite issue from a lot of the schools that I know, like that kids are just not showing up anymore. And our kids and families seem to really be pushing, the opposite to return. Yeah. But I know other schools where, the cases went up and a lot of the kids just aren't going. So
it's a mix. I can speak for the high school. It's a bit of a mixed bag.
Is it?
Just for like context, we started off the year like 94% attendance. I remember after that vacation, I think right before we went remote, we were down to 88%. I know that anecdotally, it seems like it's gotten back up a little bit. Which my thing was like, I think some of the kids decided to quarantine themselves to be safe, but there has been like a waxing and waning with attendance. But I think I think there's a real COVID fatigue that's going on.
Yeah,
definitely.
Do we know, have we gotten any guidance from SCD on any of this? If we can go from 6 feet to 4 feet, or
no.
Again, it's the pass the buck and not tell us who is actually in charge of making these decisions.
No, it's the Department of Health. I mean, we're really listening to what they're saying, but nobody will come out with a definitive answer.
And other districts are doing it. So we got to have that conversation more in depth with maybe more information.
Right.
We get to next week, but be prepared that is part of our conversation. I know a lot of people were emailing and calling board members, which is great, and we're fine with that. It's just that we don't even know yet ourselves exactly what it is. I think you guys probably have a bit of a plan. Rich and Adam and the building principals are putting the final touches on this week, and basically we'll have something to tell you on next Tuesday.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly right.
And then budget will be the following week after that again, the next.
Yes. Yep.
Is that our final one? Because it'll be grounds and all of that. Grounds.
No, I think there are two more, Christina.
Yeah. Okay.
We have sports and all that stuff to go through too, right?
Right. That's right.
Total of 5.
Don't get too excited.
March 9th is the next one.
Okay.
9th.
All right. So are we good?
I think so, JP.
Have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.